Okay, hi, good morning, everybody. My name's Andrew Morris. I'm head of pharmacy here at Swansea University. Thanks for joining us today, for wherever you've come from in the UK. And we're also live streaming this session as well. So to those of you joining online, so welcome for wherever you're joining in the world today. So I'm probably going to talk for about, I don't know, 45, 50 minutes or so. We'll think a bit about sort of pharmacy generally. I think a bit about the university as well. We'll sort of have a quick tour through some of the facilities. Then we're going to think about the course and then things around like entry requirements as well. I'm going to finish up with then some general information about scholarships and accommodation and other sort of more general aspects about studying at Swansea. I'm quite happy to take any questions as I'm talking. If you have something you suddenly think, I'd like to know more about that, or similarly, no, I'm quite happy to, we certainly will have a Q&A session at the end as well. So yeah, you can ask questions about the course, the university, the city. By that point, we will have Success, who's one of our year two students with us as well, who will be able to answer some questions from a student perspective as well. Okay, so we're here in what we call the Pharmacy Skills Suite. So this was one of a number of new facilities that we developed for the pharmacy course here at Swansea. So there's various cameras and mics sort of all around, consultation rooms at the back. I hope our sim man on the bed in there didn't scare anyone too much. If you've seen that, I will admit it gave me a bit of a shock when I opened the door in the dark this morning, and saw him lying on there. So lots of different, I guess, practice and clinical activities that take place in this room, which ultimately is, I guess, sort of the heart of pharmacy, and where you've walked through is where all of the pharmacy lecturers would be. So we're here, so at Singleton campus in Swansea. Right, so Swansea. So for those of you who are not familiar, so this is looking at sort of, I guess, Swansea on the right and the Gower Peninsula on the left from Mumbles. It's a lovely city, I think, to live and study in. And I say it's a medium-sized city, but you don't have to go too far to see some pretty spectacular beaches and other sort of outdoor activities as well. So we're here at Singleton Park, and apart from placements, this is where all of the pharmacy teaching would take place, and the various buildings here. So we will think a bit about accommodation later on, but when you are sort of thinking about potential accommodation sites, then Singleton Park is probably the place that's going to be most straightforward. Well, it certainly is the place which will be most straightforward to attend your lectures and labs and workshops. But there is other accommodation which has its advantages as well in different parts of the city. So where are we? So I'm trying to find my bearings. So we're here in the Grove building, this area here. And there are pharmacy labs that we teach in buildings here, also upstairs in this building in chemistry as well. We're really fortunate as well. So that sort of large red brick sort of building, orangey building here, which if you're sat here, you can sort of see straight over there with the blue front. So that's Singleton Hospital, which is quite a large teaching hospital right next door to the campus. And there's another even bigger teaching hospital on the outskirts of the city as well. So that's Singleton Park. The newest campus that we have is the Bay campus. So those of you, if you drove in from the M4, you will have sort of passed that on the left-hand side. So sort of teaching, I think, of business and engineering, computer science, sort of at that campus there. There are also halls of residence there as well, which you can stay in. And obviously they will be newer rooms because it's a much newer campus, but you do have to get across the city in order to get to your lectures in the morning. There is also a smaller site in Carmarthen as well, through our St David's Park campus, which we tend to use more so for teaching of some of our sort of part-time healthcare courses. But it's feasible we might use that as a bit of a base for pharmacists when they're on their placements as well in the future. Okay, so I know many of you have already applied for pharmacy at Swansea. I know some of you might be thinking about pharmacy, or perhaps you definitely want to do pharmacy and you're thinking about where to do that. Some of you might just be here not quite sure what to do, and you're just getting a feel for what pharmacy might be like. So I'll talk a bit about sort of pharmacy generally and sort of why you might want to study at Swansea. Now, I have put some stats up on this slide, but I would say you're probably going around lots of universities and you're probably discovering that there are almost as many league tables as there are universities. So every university is going to tell you something positive. So we're here at Swansea in a very well-established medical school, and one of about a third of the UK pharmacy schools to have a QS world ranking. But to be completely honest, the advice I would give to you as prospective students is you should be going around as many universities as possible, looking at different pharmacy schools and departments and getting a feel for where you feel you would be most comfortable. Because ultimately you're going to be there for 4 years and then potentially a 5th year training in that same city afterwards. So I guess that is the really important thing to be looking out for. Right, so for those of you who are here on campus, you will have the chance to have a look around some of the facilities today. I know once I've finished talking, Success is going to lead a tour of one of our teaching labs. If you want to join that, it's entirely optional. But so that's just one of sort of 5 or 6 different labs that we tend to use for pharmacy teaching. And so within a medical school, it opens up some quite interesting things we can do around sort of things like physiology and anatomy, which you don't get at all pharmacy schools and departments. We've also got a really close relationship with Singleton Hospital. This is one of their nuclear medicine scanners that they've got there as well. We've just taken all of our students over there for a day where they spent some time in nuclear medicine and looking at radiopharmacy generally as well. So do please take the opportunity to have a look around. Probably our newest, most exciting new facility is the SUSIM Centre, the Simulation and Immersive Learning Centre, which is, so there's a very, just this side now, you can see this long building here. So all of that is a simulation centre. I believe it's the largest healthcare simulation centre in Europe. So 2 floors of sort of simulated wards, clinics. We've got 8 what we call immersive simulation suites. So these essentially are, each room is probably about half the size of this one, with sort of videos projected onto the walls. So we can put you in a sort of a realistic scenario. So you're sort of starting to learn in a safe space before you start to go out on some of your placements. Sort of work with sort of VR as well over there as well. So this opened in September of 2023. So something that we'll be using increasingly on the course. Okay, so move on now to think a bit more about sort of pharmacy generally. And I appreciate many of you have done all of your homework and you might know all of this, but there might be sort of some new things that you hadn't come across before. But basically, a pharmacist is an expert in medicines. So within the medical school here, we've got a variety of different courses, from the very clinical ones, so our medicine course, physician associate course, then going right the way to our 3-year BSc courses in biochemistry, applied medical sciences, and pharmacy sort of sits nicely in the middle of all of these courses, I think, because you do get trained as a scientist. You'll spend a lot of time in the lab. Some of it sort of chemistry labs, sort of looking at microbiology, sterile manufacturing, but also there's an awful lot of clinical training as well. So you're very much trained as a pharmacist, so as a scientist and a clinician. Pharmacy is the third largest registered healthcare profession in the UK. So only medicine and nursing have more registrants, and it's a profession which is certainly growing at the moment as well. But what's really exciting for you considering a career in pharmacy is that if you choose pharmacy, by the time you register, you would also be registering not just as a pharmacist, but also as an independent prescriber as well. So all pharmacists registering from 2026 onwards will register with effectively the same independent prescribing rights that only doctors and dentists currently have. There are many pharmacists already who are prescribers, and they will have done postgraduate courses afterwards to enable them to provide different types of clinical care. But this will now mean that every pharmacist coming through will automatically have that qualification. And because of I guess the changes in the role of what a pharmacist is, it means that the NHS are now really looking at different clinical services which can be contracted from community pharmacists that can be carried out in hospitals or GP practices. So it's very much an expanding sector as well. So ultimately what that means is there are lots of jobs out there when you finally graduate. Okay, and where can those jobs be? So that they can be very, very varied, the types of roles which pharmacists do carry out, but we can perhaps sort of broadly group them into these sort of four different areas. So there is hospital pharmacy, so working at places like Singleton. So probably around about sort of 25% of pharmacists are working in a hospital setting. And I sort of say probably because there are lots of pharmacists with what we call portfolio careers. So they might spend some of their time working in a community pharmacy, sometime in a GP practice. So it's very much sort of often quite difficult to say exactly how many pharmacists are working in a particular sector. So working in hospital pharmacy, you're clearly part of a very large multidisciplinary team. You've got opportunities to specialize in particular areas. That's oncology, radiopharmacy, sterile manufacturing. So lots of different sort of areas there, and certainly use your clinical skills. The community pharmacy sector, probably around about 65% of pharmacists work in that sector. So that, I think, it's the sector which has changed the most over the last 20 years. And it's the sector, I think, which will change the most over the next 20 years as well. So pharmacists are doing more and more clinical roles in community pharmacy. This is particularly the case in Wales, where a new contract for community pharmacists was launched last year and has a really, really strong clinical theme rolling through that. And we will need prescribing pharmacists based in community pharmacies to carry out those. I guess the most rapidly growing sector, I think, is the GP practice sector. It's very rare to find a GP surgery that doesn't have a pharmacist working in now, and many will have 2 or 3 pharmacists working there, seeing patients, prescribing in the same way that a GP might be as well. And we also get lots of other pharmacists working in sort of primary care, so sort of NHS management positions and prescribing advice as well. So looking at effective prescribing, cost-effective prescribing. And then I guess you've sort of got a fourth sector that I've called it sort of industry and academia. It's much more than that. But you've got sort of people like me. I'm a pharmacist. I've not been in a patient-facing role for a very long time, but I sort of work in education and training in higher education. you get lots of pharmacists working in the pharmaceutical industry. One of the biggest employers of pharmacists in the UK is an organisation that not many people had even heard of until about 2 or 3 years ago, and that's the MHRA, which does all of the regulation of new medicines and vaccines. So lots of pharmacists in those roles, but there's a whole host of other sort of slightly different roles where you'll find pharmacists. So there are pharmacy roles in the military. I know the prisons in Swansea and Bridgend. I think each one of those has 2 pharmacists working in there. There's veterinary pharmacy, patent law. So really, most jobs that you can do with a general science degree, you could certainly do with a pharmacy degree as well. I'm just thinking about sort of pharmacists in academia. So one of my pharmacy colleagues, Mira Gergis, is also our MPharm program director. So just to highlight a lot of her research, which has gained a lot of press coverage and TV appearances in the last sort of year or two as well, looking particularly at sort of controlled drugs and other types of substance misuse. Okay, so how do you become a pharmacist? So basically, sort of, I guess, got these sort of 4 steps that you need to go through. And I should probably take it back a little bit further as well. So in order to do that MPharm degree, so I'll talk about admissions requirements in a minute, but you're looking at generally sort of science STEM A-levels, so at least 2 STEM science A-levels, to get you onto the MPharm degree, of which is around about 30 in the UK. So they are all 4-year courses. And then at the end of the 4 years, you will graduate, but you're not a pharmacist at that point, okay? So you've got an MPharm degree, you've got your certificate. That allows you to start your foundation training, which is what used to be called the pre-registration year, if you've come across that term before. So that is a paid period of training for 12 months under the supervision of 1 or more different experienced pharmacists. At the end of that foundation training, you then sit a registration exam. So that's an exam set by the regulator, which is the General Pharmaceutical Council. Then as long as you pass that exam, and there's various other GPHC requirements around DBS checks and health, and of course a fee as well. And then when you go through all of that, that then allows you to register as a pharmacist. And if you go to the GPHC website, you'll see your name listed on there. I do often get asked questions about the exam and what, how many people sort of tend to pass the exam. So generally, on average, I would expect about 9 out of 10 pharmacy graduates to pass the exam at the first attempt. Okay. If you don't pass at the first attempt, I believe you have the opportunity for another 3 months training, and then you can sort of retake the exam, so a second time in around about sort of September. And generally, most of those people who didn't pass the first time would pass the second time. But even if you didn't pass the second time, there is then you can do another 6 months training and take the exam potentially for a third and final time. Okay, it will be very rare for anyone to not pass at the third attempt. And also, I know you're also sat here as potential patients as well. You would probably want that the pharmacist stood in front of you to be someone who's made sure that they have met that standard. One thing that you can do if you want, if you're looking at different universities, the GPHC do publish pass rates for graduates from different universities. You won't see Swansea on there because we're a new program, so our students haven't got to that, but that's certainly something which allows you to get a feel for sort of pass rates from different universities. But of course, we're not necessarily comparing the same students, so you do need to take those figures a little bit with a pinch of salt. Okay, so that foundation training year, so that's where you really sort of bed in those clinical skills, and that's where a lot of the independent prescriber training will also take place as well. Now, you can apply to do your foundation training anywhere in the UK. So if you come to Swansea, you can apply to do your training in Wales or England or Scotland or somewhere else. If you study in England, you can also apply to do your training in Wales. So you're not restricted as to where you do your training. But naturally, what a lot of pharmacy graduates do tend to do is sort of perhaps cluster around the university where they've studied pharmacy. And the foundation training year in Wales really is very, very good. It's getting a lot of attention from regulatory bodies around the world, sort of trying to see what Wales is doing, because what the sort of Welsh government and HEIW, which is Health Education and Improvement Wales, which oversees all sort of NHS training in Wales, did 3 or 4 years ago, was decided to, rather than have lots of different organisations providing training, they brought them all in-house effectively. So there's a single Welsh foundation training scheme. So it's all run centrally, and importantly, it's a multi-sector training experience. So you will spend really around about 4 months in 3 different sectors. So you'll spend time in a community pharmacy, in a hospital pharmacy, and in a GP practice with a pharmacist there as well. Okay, so typically it's around about 4-4-4 in terms of the split. They've just started now looking at making the sort of the 3rd and final one a little bit longer, just to allow the pharmacy foundation trainees to make sure that they've met all of the training requirements. But it really is a really exciting training opportunity. There are some multi-sector training sites in England as well. But most of them tend to be, when they say multi-sector, often it's like 11 months in one site and maybe sort of 1 month at another one. So this is a really genuine sort of national multi-sector scheme. And I'd say wherever you end up studying pharmacy, might not be in Wales, I would encourage you to look at the training scheme here in Wales. It's basically, you are an NHS employee when you do that training as well. So you're basically on the agenda for change sort of band 5 salary. So that's what you start off that year after you've graduated. And then after you've graduated, you then move on to band 6 if you remain in the NHS, which starts at around about £35,000. I talk about salaries because whenever I go into schools, those are the questions I always get asked by students. And that's why I put this up as well. So, and the salaries in community pharmacy are even higher. You might be working a slightly longer working week. So Boots announced, this was 18 months ago, that they were going to pay all of their newly qualified pharmacists £42,000. And then a few weeks later, Superdrug said, well, we're going to pay £50,000. So I think the average salary is well over £50,000 now for community pharmacy managers. So it's a well-paid profession. It's it's clearly challenging, but it's a really diverse and interesting role. And I've obviously spent most of my time in academia. I spent a few other sectors, but when I previously worked in community pharmacy, I think it was one of the sectors I really enjoyed the most. No day is the same really when you're working there. Right. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the pharmacy team here at Swansea University now. I'm sure you can imagine I wouldn't have been very popular if I had asked all of my colleagues to come in on a Saturday morning. So I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to highlight a few key colleagues. And I guess what I should say as well is these are the people I'll introduce now. These are just the core pharmacy team who we've appointed at Swansea just to teach on the MPharm course. Of course, being based within a medical school, which has around about 200 academic staff, we can also bring in specialists in particular areas as well if we want. We bring in a lot of external practicing pharmacists as well. But in terms of our these are sort of our pharmacy academics, we group them broadly into sort of three sort of teaching groups. So our practice of pharmacy teaching group is the largest, and that's sort of led by Amira Gergis, who also is our MPharm program director. So you would see a lot of Amira if you joined us here at Swansea. The other person I'll perhaps point out on here, so Adam Turner is our year one MPharm lead as well. So he has we have a lead for each year of the course. So he has the general oversight. So again, you would see a lot of Adam in that first year of the course here at Swansea. And I suppose what I would like to sort of point out, so these are all of the different academics that we have here. Some of them are in split roles with health boards. So particularly Charlotte, Gweno and Sophie, so they're full-time teacher practitioners. So what that means is they spend 2.5 days a week in patient-facing roles in various different hospitals, running clinics, and the other 2.5 days a week, they're here on campus, giving lectures, running workshops. So you get to hear from pharmacists who are very much at the coalface and at sort of the cutting edge of practice. But what I wanted to sort of point out, so where I've put a name and I've got some things in brackets at the end, so just to point out what I mean by that. So where I have written GPHC, so that means that lecturer is a GPHC, so UK registered pharmacist. Where I've written a country name, that's where we brought in some international expertise. So these are still pharmacists, but registered in a different country. And where I've written IP, so that means that lecturer is already an independent prescriber. So clearly we're going to be training you to become independent prescribers with our colleagues at HCIW as well. So it's really important that you're being trained by people who've got prescribing experience. So we've currently got 7 independent prescribers amongst the academic team here already. Kate Spittle as well was actually one of the very first pharmacist prescribers in the whole of the UK. So back in around about 2006, when the legislation changed to allow pharmacists to become firstly supplementary prescribers and then independent prescribers. So I think she registered in about 2006 and has been prescribing since that point. So we brought in Kate again to help lead some of those developments. So that's our practice of pharmacist team. We would say teaching you clinical pharmacy practice. Health, disease and patients we've got over here. So led by Associate Professor Mohan Kumar, who's taught pharmacy all around the world. So he's a pharmacist registered in India, but has also taught in Canada, Australia, Malaysia as well, before we brought him to the UK. And Dr. Nanetti, Dr. Thomas had both previously taught at the Cardiff pharmacy course as well. And Dr. Healy joined us from another department at Swansea University. So health, disease and patients, looks at physiology, pharmacology, bits of anatomy, microbiology. And then, so finally, what we call our drugs and medicines teaching group. So I'm in that one. So we teach pharmaceutical chemistry and pharmaceutics. So I guess probably the key person to highlight here is Dr. Salvo Furler. So Salvo is our admissions tutor. So he's quite an important person when you're applying for pharmacy at Swansea. So if you have any questions about the course, they will probably be directed to Salvo first, and he would get back to you. And he oversees our admissions and interview process here at Swansea as well. So those are the people we have at the moment. We're about to advertise another couple of posts as well. So it's a growing team. So if you joined us as a pharmacy student, one of those people there would be your personal tutor, which is someone that you would meet on a fairly regular basis, and they would have sort of broad oversight of what you're doing here at Swansea, how you're getting on. If you've got any questions or problems, they would normally be the first person that you would go to as well to ask those questions. But that's where we are with the pharmacy team. Okay, we have lots of honorary appointments as well. I've not listed all of them, but sort of some of the ones who are sort of quite experienced pharmacists in practice as well. So particularly, so Professor Hartman, who's head of nuclear medicine at Singleton, or in fact at Swansea Bay generally, that's really opened up some really exciting radiopharmacy and nuclear medicine experiences, and I think probably more so than most other pharmacy departments in the UK through our work with Neil. Okay, so let's think a bit more about, I guess, sort of what pharmacy is and the structure of the course. So pharmacy is sort of very much, it's sort of, we try and teach it in as integrated fashion as possible. So certainly when you move into the second, third and fourth year, you have very broad sort of modules, which often take up an entire semester, and they are very integrated and cover lots of different subjects. In the first year, we have sort of 3 modules, which are broadly grouped around those 3 teaching groups that you saw earlier. But we could break down what you learn in pharmacy a little bit further into these sort of 7 different subject themes. So just briefly, so you will be familiar with what some of these mean. Others might be more sort of newer to you. So pharmaceutics. So that's what I teach. So that's basically I guess, the science of turning a drug, which could be a pure white crystalline powder, into a medicine which a patient can actually take. So we think about different types of medicines and delivery routes and the challenges there. Pharmaceutical chemistry, so that builds upon a lot of the things you've learned at A level. So we cover quite a lot of organic chemistry here, and also there's elements of sort of bits of physical chemistry as well, particularly when we think about analytical science as well. But yeah, you will have covered some of that at A level as well. Pharmacology and therapeutics. So here we're thinking about the action of the drug on the body. So exactly how does that particular molecule work? You know, what receptor maybe does it bind to in a particular cell or on a membrane of a cell, and thinking about that. Cellular and molecular bioscience. So again, possibly thinking about sort of things happening at a cellular level. So understanding the processes that the drug will work on. Also thinking about things around sort of microbiology as well, and the effect of microbes on human health. Human biology, so again, thinking about physiology, anatomical structures. You know, you need to understand how our healthy body works if you're going to understand how to fix it when it goes wrong. And then moving into sort of clinical pharmacy, which sort of starts to draw together bits of sort of therapeutics as well. And so thinking about what drug to use, what dose is required, what route we should be giving it to a patient by. And then sort of pharmacy practice, that brings together a whole host of things, which might include pharmacy law, ethics, ethical behavior, communication skills, and sort of a whole host of dealing with different types of social elements of pharmacy as well. We also have what we call a digital thread, sort of which runs through all of those topics, bringing together sort of computational chemistry, how we use big data and AI. And again, you can look at any university website or presentation and they'll tell you we're brilliant at this and we're brilliant at that. But if there's one sort of thing which I think Swansea University can put its hand up and say we are genuinely world leading at, that is the use of big data and AI in sort of looking at health data. Again, so those of you sat on this side, see the big ominous looking grey building right in front of you, that's our health data science building, which has around about 100 externally funded researchers in there. In the top floor are these huge computer servers which hold sort of anonymized patient data for millions of different patients. It's so secure. I think even our vice chancellor is not allowed to go up to that sort of floor. So that's sort of something that we're sort of bringing into the final year of the degree. Okay, and so that's sort of thinking of the broad topics. But what's really important about pharmacy education and training is actually getting out there and spending time with patients and spending time with practicing pharmacists as well. And we've designed our placements to mirror the foundation training scheme in Wales. Again, ourselves and Cardiff University as well have been very, very fortunate in that the Welsh government has put a significant amount of additional funding into pharmacy undergraduate training in Wales. And that's basically put pharmacy training on the same financial footing as medical training as well. So it's really opened up the type of training that we are now able to do, and allows us to send you on not only training placements in hospitals and community pharmacies, but into GP practices as well. So they start in semester 1 of the course and run right the way through, and they're also multi-sectoral. Supervision can be either by our teacher practitioners, so the ones I mentioned before, or by the placement supervisors who work for a particular company. There will be around about 50 to 60 days of placement across the 4 years of the course, and that basically builds up through the course until you're in the final year. So we basically have 5 weeks of placement in the 4th year of the course. And of course, if you do then end up staying in Wales to do your foundation training, you will likely have already spent some time possibly in the setting that you're going to spend some of your training as well. Okay, so let's think a bit more now about admissions. So I guess most commonly people apply with A levels, but we have a broad selection of different students. I'd probably say around about 75% of our students come with A levels, but that sort of leaves quite a sizable number who've come with other UK qualifications or international qualifications as well. And I think if you're watching the live stream, my colleague is probably posting some information about some international equivalences as well that map onto these A-level grades. So yeah, we're looking at typically ABB to BBB at A-level or equivalent. We expect you to have chemistry and then one other STEM subject, which could be maths, additional maths, biology or physics or psychology. The third A-level can be anything. Doesn't have to be a STEM subject. And if you're studying here in Wales, you can also use your Welsh Bac as your third subject as well. Got the international baccalaureate scores on here as well. You need GCSE maths and English well. And so you would apply to us, we'd review your application, then hopefully we would invite you for an interview. There's information about our interviews on the website. Also, if you are invited for interview, we've got like a 15-minute video that we send to you a week or so in advance that we go through and tell you a bit more about the interview and how you can potentially prepare for that. But basically, we use a sort of an online multiple mini interview format. So if you're applying for the 4-year course, what that basically means is you will have an interview with 7 other applicants at the same time. So what we do, we all get together and all 8 of us online will do a numeracy assessment in the form of like an online multiple choice quiz initially. Then after that, 4 of the applicants will go off to a separate breakout room and do a group task. And the other 4 will go around 4 individual stations where you spend about 5 minutes at each one. Sorry, 3 stations. So there'll be a station on sort of knowledge of the pharmacy profession, a station on pharmacy ethics, and a station on problem solving. The ethics and the profession station and the numeracy quiz and the group exercise are all run by our pharmacy lecturers. So again, so you get the chance to meet lots of different lecturers as part of the interview. Our problem solving station, we normally get that to be delivered by a patient volunteer. So we feel it's important that patients have a say in the admissions process to the pharmacy course itself as well. And of course, the patient volunteers have been trained in terms of what we're looking for in students. Okay, and we also offer what traditionally is referred to as a sort of foundation year or foundation course. Now it gets a bit confusing since pharmacy renamed the pre-reg year as the foundation training year. So we've renamed our course, so it's basically pharmacy with a preparatory year. So this is aimed at maybe students who've, for whatever reason, not quite got the correct A-level grades. Or maybe you've got some good grades, but they're not in the right subjects. So you've got a route in where you do a different qualification. So, and then as long as you pass that, and I say there are the requirements are 60% overall average, and there's 2 pharmacy modules that you must also get 60% in, and then pass all of the other ones as well. And that's also potentially a route for some international applicants who have maybe possibly only done 12 years of study rather than in the UK, we do 13 years here as well. And again, there's also an interview for applicants to the foundation year, but it's a slightly different format, but covers the same broad areas. The other thing that the GPHC ask all pharmacy schools to talk about at admissions events like this is just a bit about sort of fitness to practice as well. And they ask us to basically sort of say that they will carry out their own health and conduct checks at registration. But yeah, we would, when you are given an offer, we will get in touch with you and ask you to complete a DBS check. And also there is an occupational health check as well, which I think there are some seats. There's about 5 or 6 at the front if you want to come through as well. And there's a few over there as well. So that used to be a form that used to email back to us. I think it's moving to an online form this year, possibly. But anyway, the university will get in touch with you and will explain in a bit of detail. Okay, so again, there's a huge amount of information I've probably sort of given you already. There are lots of other, I guess, good places you can go to find out about sort of pharmacy education and training. The regulator, the DPHC, is a good place to go. And you can see all of the different pharmacy schools in the UK. The Royal Pharmaceutical Society, which is the professional body for pharmacy in the UK, they have some really good careers information on their website. And the BPSA is effectively like the sort of the student wing almost of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society. They've got some information as well. You can join both the RPS and the BPSA when you are students. I believe they're both free of charge as well. So we encourage all students to do that. And particularly through the RPS, that allows you access to a whole range of different electronic resources and textbooks. So it's definitely worthwhile doing that. And similarly, though, generally for the text and reference books that we recommend to you as part of our course, probably 90% of the ones we recommend are available as ebooks through our university library as well. So it's not that you have to go out and spend an awful lot of money on books when you join us here. Okay, so what I'm going to do for the final sort of 5 or 10 minutes is just talk a bit more generally about the university. But then after that, I'll happily answer any sort of questions about absolutely anything. But just sort of generally in terms of information about scholarships. So all of this you'll find on the university website. But probably the really key ones, and they say these often apply to pharmacy applicants because you tend to be quite strong students typically. So if you apply with at least 3 A's at A level or equivalent, then you would qualify for the Excellence Scholarship. So that basically is £750 in each year of the course. And that is actually money that you get given to you in your bank account. It's not just knocked off the fee, so you never ever see it. So that's actually money you can actually, real money you can spend. And then if you were to get at least AAB at A level, so there's the merit scholarship is basically sort of £500 in each year of the course. And they say there's various other things that may or may not apply to you that you can have a look at. So we're a proud bilingual university. We have certainly, well, 2 of our pharmacy academics are fluent Welsh speakers, and many of the others also speak Welsh as well. So if you are applying as a fluent Welsh speaking student, you can be assigned a Welsh speaking personal tutor from within the pharmacy team. We don't presently offer any pharmacy modules as such through literally being taught in Welsh, but you still can potentially apply for some of these Welsh scholarships, because as long as potentially maybe you undertake a placement in a majority Welsh speaking part of the country, or maybe you do a research project with either with a Welsh speaking supervisor or again with Welsh speakers, there is still then the scope that you can apply for certain scholarships through that approach. And I say there are some information here today, I think, on campus if you want to find out a bit more about that, if that applies to any of you. Okay, so what else? So again, I think it's worth highlighting, so to those of you in the room and those of you joining online. So we are a very, very diverse, I think, group of pharmacy lecturers and students as well. I in particular really value, I think, the international element of pharmacy. So I personally spent around about 13 years teaching pharmacy overseas. I gained a huge amount from that myself, and I encourage pharmacy students to, where possible, look into an international exposure. The university has a number of summer vacation international placements that you can apply for. We potentially will offer some international research projects as well by the time you start. So certainly something which is very important. And our academic staff within pharmacy, so as well as our British academics, we've got academics who are French, Italian, Malaysian, Iraqi, Indian. I'm probably missing some more out as well. So we're a very broad, diverse team. We've got students, so these are figures for the whole university, but we've got students from multiple different countries on the pharmacy course as well. We are, I think, increasingly becoming a more sustainable university, and this is one of the reasons why we have moved to online admissions rather than expecting you to travel all the way to Swansea. And so hopefully you'll have 5 different pharmacy interviews, and obviously that's a lot of petrol and carbon dioxide. It's also probably lots of days off that parents and guardians have to take as well, ferrying you around the UK. So again, we feel it's a much more sustainable approach in terms of admissions. And of course, you can visit us on any of our open days as well and actually see the campus. This is a general sort of university slide. I've left it in there, I guess, but ultimately, as a pharmacy graduate, you are on one of those vocational programs that really means that you've effectively got a job at the end of it. And so there is still a real shortage of pharmacists right the way across the NHS and the private sector in the UK. Okay, so more broadly, so have a look around the campus when it's not raining, hopefully. There are lots of other people you can sort of talk to here today, and our campus life team are around on campus and can give advice on all of these different areas. But there's a lot of this as you'll find on the website as well. Cost of living. Swansea is a relatively inexpensive city to live in. Compared to certainly many of the other, I think, UK cities. So we've got some sort of general sort of average information there as well, certainly. We do also have a guaranteed accommodation offer, obviously within there are certain time limits in terms of when you apply. I think usually the deadline is around about clearing time, so sort of mid to late August. But obviously, the earlier you apply, then the better chance you have of getting your favoured hall of residence or favoured site. So again, specifically for parents or guardians, there's some additional information there. So you can just swansea.ac.uk/parents, or that QR code there. So again, that's information more tailored to perhaps some of the questions that you might want to ask, rather than the things your children are more interested in. And that really, I guess, is essentially it. There's lots of other information on here, things you can keep in touch with us as well.